Welcome back, friends. In today's video number 27 in the series of elementary logic subject for first year BA LLB students from Mumbai University. This is the semester 1 portion that I'm covering. This is module 4. We are going to look into the topic of division, logical division, rules and fallacies of division, division by dichotomy. Let us look at the overview of what actually logical division is. Logical division is a systematic method of breaking down. Now, when we say division, we can remember the keyword breaking down because you're dividing. What are we dividing? You're dividing a broader class into its subclass. So basically, a broader class into its subcomponents. But again, these are also classes only, but of the broader class. For example, this may be an animal class, broader class, and these could be lion, tigers, and so on, like different elephants, giraffe. So, it is a method of breaking down a broader class into its subclasses or categories. So, we are dividing it into different categories. Mammals could be animals, birds, and so on, like basically dividing it into either subclasses or categories based on a single principle or criteria. The division has to be on the basis of a single principle or criteria. It is commonly used in reasoning and classification to organize information clearly and logically. Let's look at the rules of logical division. One is single principle. This is fundamentum divisionis. The division must follow one consistent basis or criterion throughout. Example, dividing books based on genres, fiction and non-fiction. So the first rule of logical division is that the division has to follow one consistent method or basis or criteria for the division. Exhaustiveness. The division must cover all possible members of the class being divided. Nobody should be left out. If we are following a method of division, a single method of division or single principle for the division, then all members of that major class, of that broader class, has to be divided into classes. No member of that class should be left out. It should cover all possible members of the class being divided. Dividing numbers into odd and even numbers ensures completeness. Mutual exclusivity. Subclasses must not overlap with each other. That is, one part of the lion should not go into tiger or whatever, like tiger into elephant. They should be all mutually exclusive. The class of lion should contain only lions, class of tigers only tigers, and so on. So, one method of division, one principle used for the division throughout. It should be exhaustive, that is, it should cover all possible members, and the members should not overlap in different classes. So they should be exclusive. Each subclass must not overlap with each other. For example, dividing vehicles into land vehicles, air vehicles, avoids overlap. Gradual specificity. The division should move from general to specific categories. Example, dividing animals into vertebrates and invertebrates, then further into subcategories. So the division has to follow like a tree. So this will be further subdivided, these two will be further subdivided, and so on, like this way. So, single principle of division, single method, single criteria throughout the division. It should be exhaustive, that is, it should be cover every member of the class, of the broader class. It should be mutually exclusive, that is, they should a member of one class should not overlap with the member of the other class, and there should be gradual specificity, means we have to divide gradually the broader class into its specific categories. The members, all members should be covered and they should be categorized into their specific categories. And the division should move from general to specific categories. Avoiding of negative terms. Use positive terms to define subclass for better clarity. The incorrect way of division is dividing animals into non-mammals and mammals. That is, you start with mammals first and then non-mammals. This is very simple. So there are 5 ways of division, rules for division in logic. What are the fallacies of division? Cross division. This occurs when subclasses overlap due to mixed principles or criteria. So here we have covered 2 rules into one in cross division. When this happens, that is when the principles or the criteria are mixed. They are not a single principle. There, because of that, what happens is the subclasses overlap, and this is where the fallacies of division occurs. That is the cross division. For example, dividing furniture into wooden furniture and tables. Now, tables can also be wooden, so we are basically overlapping. There is an overlapping of the members into its subclasses. That is, we have furniture here, and then we have categorized. This is a broad one, broad category. We have divided into subclasses. One is table and one is wooden furniture. So what is happening is we have not followed the rule of single criteria or single principle or single basis for the division, and therefore we have 2 subclasses or subcategories in which they are overlapping. Incomplete division. This happens when the division does not account for all members of the class. This follows the principle of exhaustiveness and mutual exclusivity. Example, dividing living beings into animals and humans. Now, we know that humans are also a part of animals. Also, the plants are also excluded. So, incomplete division. Now, what happens when the division does not account for all members of the class? It violates the rule of exhaustiveness, because the division must cover all possible members of the class being divided. Exhaustiveness. Incomplete division leads to fallacy of or breaking of the rule of exhaustiveness. Arbitrary principle. Using irrelevant or inconsistent criteria for division. This is similar to the cross division because in that also subclasses overlap due to mixed principle or criteria. Now, whether we use mixed principle or criteria or irrelevant inconsistent criteria for division, dividing people into tall people and those who like coffee. This is irrelevant. It has no relevance to the division part. This is an arbitrary principle. Now, this breaks the rule of gradual specificity and single principle, arbitrary principles. Too broad or too narrow classes. If the subclasses are not appropriately balanced in scope, it leads to improper division. For example, dividing books into hardcover and novels. This mixes the format and the content. Now, which rule does the too broad and too narrow classes breaks? The rule of gradual specificity. That is, the division should move from general to specific categories. Now, let us understand the division by dichotomy. Division by dichotomy is a method of dividing a class into two mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive subclasses. It involves splitting the whole into two opposing categories. Dichotomy means two opposing categories, basically opposing view. Let us recap this division by dichotomy because this is one of the topics of Mumbai University in elementary logic. It is a method of dividing a class into two mutually exclusive. What was exclusive in this? Exclusive means it excludes or includes everything. Mutually exclusive. That is, they should not overlap with each other. Two mutually exclusive, that is, S should be separate, P should be separate. Mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Exhaustive means it should cover everything that it should cover. Every member should be included in this class of S, and every member should be included in the class of P as well. Nothing should be left out. It should be exclusive as well as exhaustive subclasses. It involves splitting the whole into the broad category into two opposing categories. So earlier there was a broad category of S and P, and now they have been subcategorized or split into two opposing categories. Now there's a difference here. Here we are not doing division by way of gradual specificity, all right, nor with single principle, but we are doing it by way of opposing categories. Let us understand it by examples. For example, odd and even. So there are many numbers in this category of SP, broad category. Now we have divided them by breaking them up into exclusive and exhaustive. So all odd numbers are covered in the S, all even numbers are covered in the P, and they are opposing categories, moral and immoral things. What all this broad category of SP contained moral and immoral things like smoking, drinking. Maybe it's not really immoral, but let's take it as an example. Virtues, kindness, moral things. So moral is completely put into S, immoral things are put into P. So the key word here is two opposing categories. Direct evidence and circumstantial evidence is another example. So in this method of division by dichotomy, what we are doing is we are dividing a broader class into two mutually exclusive as well as collectively exhaustive subclasses. So it involves splitting the whole into two opposing categories. Let's move forward. What are the key features? It should be mutually exclusivity. Means the two categories must not overlap. It should exclude everything. The category S should exclude everything that is in P, and category P or the class P or the subclass P should exclude everything that is of class S. Exhaustiveness. The divisions should cover all possibilities which I spoke about. S should include all S, that is all even numbers, and P should cover all odd numbers. Nothing should be left out. Binary opposition. The division often involves contrasting features. Of course, this is opposite features like odd, even, living, non-living, opposite features basically, or opposing categories. So binary opposition. What is binary? 1 and 0. Either it is 0 or it is 1. Bi means 2. So these are two parts. Two parts. Let us look at kinds of evidence. These are the basic topics of the module 4. So I am briefly covering these topics and then we'll go into more detail. If you feel like skipping certain parts, feel free to do that and move forward. Kinds of evidence. Application in logical division. How are evidence divided or the division happens in logic? In the context of law, logical division is applied to classify evidence into various categories for systematic legal reasoning. Now, in this part, what we are trying to do is we are going to classify evidence into categories. Now, when we say categories, of course, it is division, which we studied earlier. Now, let us look at direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, primary evidence, secondary evidence, documentary evidence, oral evidence, and physical evidence. So, there are total 7 types in which the evidence is subdivided. So we have evidence, it's a broad category. Now we will be dividing it into 7 parts. Evidence is divided into, the division happens in 7 parts. The direct, circumstantial evidence, primary evidence, and secondary evidence. Let's cover these 4 first. Direct evidence. Evidence that directly proves a fact without the need for inference. Inference we need not do to come to the conclusion. For example, A is a father means A is a man. This is a direct evidence that A is a man. This could be something else also. For example, a thief being caught red-handed with a knife or with the thing that he has stolen. So that's a direct evidence. A witness seeing a crime occur. This is also an example of a direct evidence. Evidence that directly proves a fact without the need for inference. Circumstantial evidence. Evidence that requires inference to connect it to a conclusion of fact. For example, finding the suspect's fingerprints at the crime scene. So this requires inference. Circumstantial evidence requires inference to connect it to a conclusion of fact. Primary evidence, the original document or material presented as evidence. The original signed contract or a copy of a will for a probate. Secondary evidence, a copy or substitute of the original evidence, a photocopy of a contract. So these four are very simple. Direct evidence, indirect evidence. Indirect means circumstantial evidence, primary evidence, and secondary evidence. Fifth is documentary evidence. Evidence in the form of documents, emails, contracts, letters, oral evidence, statements made by witnesses under oath, testimonies in court. So now we have six: direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, primary evidence, secondary evidence, documentary evidence, and oral evidence. The last is physical evidence, tangible items that can be presented in court, a weapon used in a crime, for example, a knife or a gun or a car. Of course, you can't present the car, but uh, clothing, and so on. Conclusion. So logical division, especially division by dichotomy, plays a critical role in organizing and understanding information. In the legal domain, it is particularly useful for classifying evidence systematically, enabling lawyers and judges to evaluate facts with precision. However, strict adherence to the rules of logical division is essential to avoid fallacies and ensure clarity. Practical use of definition and division in law for lawyers. Now, if you want to skip this part further, because this would be going into more details now. Otherwise, you can continue listening. Definition and division. Basically, I'm trying to explain here both the definition and the division part. The definition and division are essential tools in legal reasoning, enabling lawyers to interpret, argue, and apply legal concepts with clarity and precision. These logical methods assist lawyers in crafting arguments, analyzing statutes, and ensuring the fair application of law. Okay, practical uses of definition in law. Now, in the earlier video, we learnt about definition, although some concepts of that was not clear to me. So, in this video, it will become more clearer. Clarifying legal terms in definition. Lawyers often define terms to ensure there is no ambiguity in their application. Legal definitions are critical for interpreting statutes, drafting contracts, and arguing cases. Example: in law of contracts, the term consideration is defined as something of value exchanged between parties to make an agreement enforceable. So, the term consideration is defined in law of contracts. In law of torts, nuisance is defined as an unreasonable interference with a person's use or enjoyment of their property. Resolving ambiguities. Definitions are used to clarify vague or ambiguous terms in legislation or contracts, ensuring that all parties interpret them consistently. So, first, we have to clarify, or as a lawyers, legal terms are clarified so that there is no ambiguity. Next, we also use definitions to, if there is vagueness or ambiguous term, then definition helps to clear even that vagueness. The first criteria is that there should be no ambiguity. Second is that even if there is, then it is further clarified. For example, in the case of medical negligence, the term standard of care is defined to clarify the duty of a healthcare professional. Third, establishing the scope of legal provisions. Defining terms helps delineate the scope of laws and legal responsibilities. For example, the definition of public nuisance in the law of torts specifies acts that affect the community at large, distinguishing it from private nuisance, which impacts an individual. So, the three uses of definition that we studied was, first, we want to remove ambiguity, that there should be no ambiguity. Second is, if there is ambiguity or a little bit confusion, then the definition further clarifies the vagueness or the ambiguous term, that so that all parties can interpret them consistently. Third is clearly defining. The definition clearly ensures that the scope is defined for that term. So when the term public nuisance is further elaborated upon, then it clearly distinguishes public nuisance from private nuisance by specifying the acts that comes under public nuisance, by way of showing that how the act of a person affects the community at large. Fourth, drafting contracts and legal documents. Lawyers use precise definitions to avoid misunderstandings and disputes. A lease agreement may define terms like premises, what a premises is, tenant is, default is, to eliminate ambiguity. Now, default could be of 40 days, 90 days, whatever, or not giving payment on time, that could be also default. A tenant could be clearly defined to indicate that the tenancy is only for 11 months or for 99 years, for example, for long term lease. Premises could be a flat or a bungalow or 2 BHK, bedroom, hall, kitchen, and so on. This eliminates ambiguity in understanding the terms of the contracts or the legal document. So, four of them. One is why definitions are useful. The definition helps in clearing ambiguity, that is, no ambiguity at all, in interpreting the statutes and laws. The second was clarifying ambiguous terms, vague terms, by further defining it and removing any inconsistencies in how they are interpreted. The third was the scope of the definition, that it clearly delineates itself from other similar type of terms. For example, public nuisance clearly states what is included in public nuisance, separating itself from private nuisance, and it helps in drafting contracts and legal documents to avoid misunderstanding and disputes. Now, let's understand the practical uses of division in law. Division is a logical tool that helps organize and classify legal concepts, cases, and evidence. So basically, here in definition we defined a term, whereas in division we are organizing and classifying the legal concepts, classes, cases, and evidences. It ensures systematic reasoning and aids in legal problem solving. Classifying legal concepts. Division helps lawyers break down broad legal concepts into specific categories for analysis and application. For example, in law of evidence, evidence can be divided into direct evidence, circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence would be eyewitness testimony, and circumstantial evidence would include fingerprints at the crime scene. In criminal law, crimes are divided into felonies and misdemeanors. That is, felonies include serious crimes like murder. Misdemeanors include less serious crimes like petty theft. So, in criminal law, we have crimes divided into felonies and misdemeanors, which is misdemeanors are basically less serious crimes like petty theft or small crimes, whereas felonies are serious crimes like murder. Organizing, these are the practical uses of division in law. The second part is organizing legal arguments. Division aids lawyers in presenting structured arguments by dividing a case into smaller, manageable issues. For example, in a breach of contract case, the lawyer may divide the issues into whether a valid contract exists, whether there was a breach of the contract, whether the damages resulting, what are the damages resulting from the breach, and so on. So, when we use division, we are breaking down the legal arguments into its subcategories. The broad category is divided into subcategories. So there was a breach, there was a contract, and there were terms in this contract. Now these terms are further subclassified as whether this contract itself was valid, was there a breach, what kind of breaches had happened, and what damages can be claimed for this breach. So we have evidence, and then we have further subclassified as direct, direct evidence, and circumstantial evidence. For in criminal law, we are further dividing it into felonies and misdemeanors. Third, analyzing statutes and precedents. Divisions help lawyers interpret and apply complex statutes or precedents by breaking them into distinct parts. For example, the Indian Penal Code divides offences into categories such as offences against the state, offences against the person, offences against property. Examples are sedition for state, for persons it is murder and assault, and for property it is theft and robbery. Categorizing evidence. Division is crucial in organizing evidence to build a case. For example, documentary evidence like contracts, wills, physical evidence like murder weapons, oral evidence like witness testimonies. So we are categorizing evidence, we are analyzing statutes and precedents by method of division, then organizing the legal arguments, classifying legal concepts. So all these are all examples of divisions. Distinguishing legal responsibilities. Division clarifies the duties and liabilities of parties in a case. For example, in a medical negligence case, liability may be divided into doctor's duty of care and hospital's duty to maintain safety standards. So this is very useful for the lawyers as well as for the students in exams to understand this concept of division. Examples in legal practice. Defining and dividing nuisance. So we divide nuisance into private nuisance and public nuisance. Classifying contracts into express contracts, implied contracts, void contracts. Dividing negligence in medical cases to duty of care by the doctor, breach of duty due to substandard treatment, and proving that the breach caused harm to the patient. So we are dividing one broad category into its subcategories. Now, what is logical division? We are recapping again. Logical division, this will come in a question answer format. What is a logical division? Logical division is the process of breaking down a general concept or a broad category into or class into its constituent subclasses or categories based on a single principle or fundamentum. Division is single principle. Okay, this is the key word. The aim is to make the components distinct, separate, mutually exclusive. That is, each class should exclude all other members of other classes, and it should be collectively exhaustive, meaning it should contain all members of the broad category into its division. For example, as I showed earlier, so we had P and S here. So P contains all P's and S contains all S separately. They should not overlap. That is, they should be mutually exclusive. And collectively exhaustive means all S of the broad should be in the S, and all members of the P in the broad category should be included in the P subclass. So this division helps in organizing information systematically and avoiding ambiguity. I may skip many of these because we have already covered. It should be exclusive. What is exclusive means that the subclass must not overlap. It should be exclusive. Exhaustive means it should cover all possible members of the broad category. Consistency. The division principle should be consistent. That is, using of single principle, which is the key word for the definition of division. So the definition of division is breaking down general concept or class into its constituent subclass or categories based on single principle. We'll take an example: dividing animals into mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish. The principle of division here is the biological classification. We should know how we are classifying the term animal based on their psychological and reproductive traits. So, how does logical division differs from other types of division? One is enumeration of individuals. Enumeration lists individual members of a class without categorizing them systematically. Example: naming individual animals such as lions, tigers, elephants, dogs is enumeration, not division. Enumeration means listing of individual members of a class, and we are not categorizing them, we are just listing them. So there is a division and there is a logical division. Logical division groups the individuals into categories based on common principle. So here now we are learning about division based on common principles or single principle, whereas enumeration simply lists. Enumerate means to list them without any structure. So for example, all numbers are listed like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We just list them in a normal division. But in logical division, we are categorizing these numbers into odd and even. Physical division. Physical division breaks a material object into its tangible parts or components. Example, cycle into tires, handles, and so on. Example, dividing a car into its engine, wheels, and chassis. Difference, that is division. In logical division, it deals with the abstract or conceptual classes, while physical division pertains to tangible entities. So when we are physically dividing lions, tigers, we are doing it in an abstract or conceptual class. It is not a physical division. Metaphysical division. Metaphysical division involves dividing an abstract or philosophical concept into its essential components or principles. Dividing beings into substance and accident in metaphysics. Whereas in logical division, it focuses on subclasses within a class, while metaphysical division deals with fundamental principles of abstract concepts. This we can skip. Verbal division Verbal division concerns itself with analyzing and distinguishing the different meanings or usages of a term. This is the verbal definition. Dividing the word right into moral right, legal right, or directional right. This is the division when it happens in a normal day to day life. Whereas in the logical division, it categorizes members of a class, whereas verbal division focuses on semantics and linguistic analysis. Now, what is the relation between definition and division? Once again, we have broadly covered the topic of module 4 of division, logical division. So, if feel free to skip through if you want to move on to another video. I'm going into more detailed understanding of definition and division. Definition and division are closely related concepts in logic, as they are both tools used to classify and organize knowledge. While definition aims to explain the meaning of a term by stating its essential attributes, division categorizes a class into its constituent part or subclasses by a single principle. Both serve the purpose of precision in reasoning and communication. Traditional view on definition and division. Definition explains the essence. Definition describes the fundamental nature of a concept, usually by the method of per genus at differentium, that is, defining by genus and specific differences. Example, a triangle is defined as a polygon. Polygon is a genus with 3 sides, specific difference. Division organizes the defined class. So division comes after the class is defined. Once a concept is defined, division is used to classify it into its subordinate categories, subcategories, based on specific principles. Example, after defining polygon, it can be divided into subclasses such as triangles, quadrilaterals, and pentagons. Mutual dependence. A clear definition is essential for a valid division because division relies on a proper understanding of the class. So until a class is not defined correctly and the subcategories or the subclasses are not defined, there can be no division happening in that. Division is not possible. So both are interconnected. So to do division, we require definition of the terms, and for definition, we need to understand how the division is going to happen. Until we don't know the subcategories of a class or a broader class, without its definition, it cannot be further subdivided. So they are dependent. Modern logicians broaden the scope of both definition and division, emphasizing their practical and analytical use in various fields, including science, philosophy, and law. Definition as both connotative and denotative. Modern definitions are not limited to stating the essence, the connotation, but also consider the scope or the range of the concept, that is, denotation. Example, defining justice may involve not only its ideal meaning, but also how it is applied in different contexts, like social or legal justice. Division as analytical tool. Division in a modern logic is treated as a method to explore and analyze concepts comprehensively. It is applied not just to terms but also to arguments, propositions, and theories. Example, in modern classification, evidence in law can be divided into direct and circumstantial evidence, and further evidences which we saw earlier, like primary evidence, secondary evidence, documentary evidence, physical evidence, verbal evidence, helping lawyers and judges analyze facts more effectively. Flexibility in methods. Modern logic acknowledges multiple methods of division, dichotomous division, hierarchical division, and applies them based on context. We'll look at the key differences between the traditional and the modern view. Traditional view focuses on the essence of concepts and their fixed hierarchy, whereas modern view focuses more broader and more practical applications. Traditional view's definition is based on per genus ad differentium, whereas modern view considers both connotative and denotative meanings. Traditional view is more rigid and follows hierarchical categories, whereas modern view is more flexible, analytical, and context specific. Traditional view is used for knowledge classification, whereas modern view uses it for analytical precision and real world application. Let us understand the meaning of denotation. I am skipping many of these parts. Denotation refers to the literal, direct, or specific meaning of a term. This can come for definition. Denotation. It includes the range of objects or entities to which the term applies. Example, triangle denotes all shapes with three sides. Whereas connotation refers to the essential attributes or characteristics. This is the difference. It basically, denotation means some object or entity like triangle, man, and so on, father, and the connotation is basically what that term attribute or characteristic is, or what that term implies. For example, triangle would mean something which has three sides or whose angles, total angles measure is 180 degree, and so on. Like father is loving, kind, and so on. Flowers is beautiful or something like that. Connotation would be for a flower, the connotation would be beautiful, red or white or whatever. Love, that would all be connotations because it explains its attributes or characteristics. Division by dichotomy. This is an important part. This is part of the syllabus. Division by dichotomy is a logical method of dividing a class or concept into two mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive parts. This method involves splitting a whole into exactly two subclasses, one of which possesses a particular attribute or property and the other which does not. So with this we have already covered. I mean, for example, a broader category containing S and P, whatever it may be, S may be sugar, P may be, for example, parrot. So we know that sugar and parrot are completely opposite. They have nothing in common. So we categorize sugar into one class and parrot into another class. They each possess a particular attribute or property which the other class does not have. Division by dichotomy is a process of dividing a class into two parts based on the presence or absence of a specific characteristics or property, humans, non-human beings. That is, the broad category was living beings into humans and non-humans. Steps in division by dichotomy. Start with a defined whole. Clearly define the concept or class to be divided. Example, the class numbers. Identify a specific property, that is, being even or being odd. Select a single attribute or property to use as the basis of the division first. Then divide into two subclasses. Create two mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive group. Remember this word, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. One group possessing the property, the other group lacking the property. That is even numbers and odd numbers. Value of division by dichotomy. Division by dichotomy has several advantages, particularly in logical analysis, reasoning, and classification. Basically, it gives us more precise, there is more precision in our understanding when the classes are further subdivided into two distinct and non-overlapping categories. Each item in the class must belong to one and only one of the categories. So we are now narrowing down the terms into separate categories. So there is more clarity, there is more precision, exhaustiveness. The method guarantees that the entire class is accounted for. It's exhaustive. It covers everything that the broad category had into separate subcategories. As every member of the class either possesses the attribute or does not. Simplicity. Dichotomous division is simple to understand and apply, making it a useful tool for beginners in logic analysis. Use in binary systems. This method is foundational to the binary system, that is, computers, mathematics, programming, where concepts are divided into 0 and 1 or true and false. Application in law. Dichotomy is frequently used in law context to clarify distinctions. For example, legal or illegal. So we have divided all actions into legal actions or illegal actions. Excuse me. Limitations of division by dichotomy. Oversimplification. Some concepts are too complex to be divided into just two parts. Dichotomy may oversimplify nuanced ideas. Arbitrary criteria. The choice of dividing property can be arbitrary and subjective, which may affect the usefulness of the division. No subdivisions. Dichotomy does not provide further subdivisions within the two categories, which may limit its utility in certain contexts. Few examples of biological classification: living beings into plants and non-plants, legal classification into legal and illegal, mathematics, it would be positive and non-positive numbers, philosophical, mortal and immortal beings, daily context, urgent, non-urgent. So we do have rules of logical division which we have already covered. This is more in detail. So let's go through this. These are the rules. The logical division is a method of systematically breaking down a concept or a class into subclass based on specific principle or a single principle. For a logical division to be valid, it must adhere to certain rules to ensure clarity, precision, and accuracy and remove all ambiguities. The division must be based on a single principle. This we have already covered. It is known as fundamentum divisionis. So dividing students based on their grades. Only one single principle is to be utilized for dividing all members of a broad category. For example, high achieving students, average students, below average students. So this is based on their grades. The subclass must be mutually exclusive. That is, they should not overlap. Exclusive means not included. Other members of the subcategories should not be included in or should not overlap with other classes. Each member of the original class should belong to only one subclass. Overlapping subclasses indicate an illogical division. So vehicles into two-wheelers and four-wheelers and three-wheelers maybe, and based on the number of tires. These subclasses must be collectively exhaustive. That is, it should cover all possible members of the original class. No member should be left out. Division should proceed gradually from general to specific. The division should start from broader categories and move towards more specific ones. Jumping between unrelated levels disrupt logical progression. Start with animal, divide it into mammals and non-mammals, further divide mammals into carnivorous and herbivorous. Avoid the fallacy of too wider or too narrow divisions. Explanation: a division is too wide if it includes elements that do not belong to the original class. A division is too narrow if it excludes some elements of the original class. This is self-explanatory. The division should use positive terms wherever possible. Avoid the negative terms. So for example, regular attendees, irregular attendees. Not Don't start with non-lazy students and then lazy no, or then lazy students. Meaning instead of saying regular or competent students or studious, we are saying non-lazy. So this confuses the term. We are creating more confusion. Violation, these are all fallacies of division. When we violate the mutually exclusivity rule by dividing students into science students, part-time students. Basically, they don't belong to the same category. Violation by collectiveness, dividing animals into mammals, birds, because again excludes the reptiles. This is not exhaustive. Violation of single principle, violation of gradual specificity. So this completes the topic on division, logical division, the rules and fallacies of division. This also we covered. The division by dichotomy also we covered. Kinds of evidences we covered. So we covered all parts of the module 4 in this video. Hope this video has helped you in your understanding of the elementary logic subject for first year BA LLB. If this has helped you, do consider subscribing if you haven't. Share it, like it with your friends. Share it with your friends. Do like it as it motivates me to create more videos. Regardless, I've been creating more videos. It doesn't matter. This because this helps me only. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.